Welcome back. Walter, prisons. We know how it affects black people, but I think you got a even bigger, more expansive piece than that. Have at it, sir.
So initially, this was something that came to my mind when I was reading an article about Illinois and how they became the first state to completely wipe out their cash bail system, and it will be ended by 2025. Completely, no more being held for bond. So as I started looking into it even more, there are a lot of disparities to African Americans, Hispanics, and to poor people. But I want to start a little bit with a little bit of historical documentation.
Yes.
The Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America. I'm going to piece them up a little bit and start with the Fourth. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Going to the Fifth, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless the presentment of indictment or grand jury except in the rising case of land of forces skip forward. No person shall be called to be a witness against himself or herself or deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law, nor shall that private property be taken for public use without just compensation. And then Article 6. In all criminal prosecution, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed the nature of the cause of accusation, to be confronted with the witness against them, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. So all that led me to look into this cash bail system, because to me it's probably the most unfair thing in the history of the entire world. I get arrested for a crime off an accusation, not necessarily by a witness, just off an accusation or suspicion of crime. I get brought before a judge or a magistrate, and they say, okay, great, Mr. Sellers, you have been charged with XYZ crime. We know that you have not been found guilty yet, but there's a chance you could run away. So I'm going to slap you with a $500,000 bond that you got to post in order for you to get out. So not a lot of Americans have $500,000 in the bank lying around. So you can then secure that bond against your property. And that bond of that property, real estate, or something of value or cash will be returned to you when you come back to trial. But the bail power resides and rests, as I stated, with the judge or the magistrate. And they have the ability to increase, decrease, or completely eliminate the bail for any individual for any reason whatsoever. Typically, there's a standard to an offense. You steal a candy bar, there's no bail. You murder somebody, it's $1 million. But like I said, that judge has the discretion to lower, raise, or completely waive it. If the accused can't afford the bail, then a bail bondsman comes into play. And that company will guarantee the bond for a fee, typically 10 to 15%, whatever that sticker bond is. Or the defendant will remain in custody until trial. The repercussions are huge, right? So if you can't afford bail and you can't afford a bail bondsman, and you're in jail for X amount of months or years in the case that I'll talk about a little bit later on, you can lose your job, your home, you can lose your family, custody of your kids, get kicked out of wherever you're living, even if you paid your rent or your mortgage, just because you're being held in jail on bond. While I've looked at this, I found out that 60% of the people that are in jail right now have not been convicted of a crime. They're waiting for a trial.
No idea the number was that high.
Yeah, 60%. I didn't know either until I started looking at it.
What was that show on Netflix where people were finding love in jail? They were like on the 5th floor of that building, like everybody in there hadn't even gone to trial. They just in there.
That's in there. Right. So I started looking further, since the majority of us are from Maryland or live in Maryland. Maryland's like the worst state for bail, okay, for black people. Okay, Black people, when accused of a charge, are double. Their bail is double every other race in America. Asian, Hispanic, white, off the rip. However, black people only represent 30% of the people that are actually in jail. So it started me thinking, how does disparate impact affect black people? And this is where I think the broader context of the conversation comes in, because the implicit bias that people have about black people, this is where it comes into play. Okay? Black men, the bail is typically 35% more than white men. Latino men, bail is typically 19% more than white men. So why does that matter? Well, over 85% of judges and magistrates are white.
Yeah.
So, and as they examine a case or a trial of a black man that's 16 or 17 or 18 or 20 years old, their appearance is that they're 30 or 35. How do we know that? Let's ask Tamir Rice. Right? He was 12. The state became his judge, jury, executioner in less than 5 seconds. Right? Khalif Browder was put in jail for supposedly stealing a backpack. His bond was $3,000. His family couldn't raise the $300 to get him out of MCU rather. But this kid spent 3 years in jail without a trial. How is that possible? Is that a speedy trial of 3 years? And by the time they figured it out, he had been through so much trauma, sexual abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse, being stuck in solitary confinement, that he took his own life 2 years later. I mean, that's the most tragic thing in American history, at least after slavery, after Reconstruction, after civil rights, how we get treated. So I think this case in Illinois, where they have totally wiped out the cash bond system, at least they will in the next couple of years, is profound, because tied to that are some other things that are near and dear to me. All police officers in the state of Illinois will now require to have state licensing, which can be revoked at any given time due to misconduct without having a police review board, without having all those things completely independent from the police force. That's something that we could adopt nationally, getting rid of qualified immunity, in my opinion. All police officers are required to have body cams. It's easier to decertify cops who commit misconduct. There's also going to be a victims compensation fund that will not just be for police brutality, but also for people who are wrongfully imprisoned. So these are things that I believe are pertinent and important to our community at large. And I guess the broader context is, how do we begin to make these motions to get it enacted across the country, not just in these isolated places like Illinois or California, New York. Those are really the only states in the District of Columbia where these type of things are being looked at. They're not wiped out, they're just being reduced.
There's a really lot there. First of all, that was a great job, man. Like, anytime like you can get little civics in there, you got me. This issue is actually making hay, and it's part of the kind of left-right lexicon. I actually think I'm going to general broader politics now, and not just black people. There's a lot of momentum on this. Like, for instance, Senator Rand Paul was all about ending cash bail. He's not a black people. Like, it is one of those property issues that, and you took it to, he would say it's a Fourth Amendment issue, right? Mm-hmm. And like, that's where you're seeing this in states, and I think that's how it's going to happen in states. Like, as it happens, like we're kind of seeing with marijuana, like we've seen for the past 15, 20 years, we're going to see it with cash bail and things like that. We've discussed with friends many times about issues like this, and they particularly impact Black people. But we saw that they tried to nationalize this in the police reform bill this summer. And it's just, you just don't have, there's just too many white people now in qualified immunity.
Right.
Or say that what you have to do. And it sounds weird coming from a very leftist Democrat who believes in big government. These issues you have to take state by state. It's the only way it's gonna work. Eventually, there's enough momentum for it to become popular within Congress. So, for instance, we have $15 minimum wage. That's not going to happen federally. It's not ready to be put in legislation right now. But we see individual states, red states like Florida, passing the $15 minimum wage. So this is a really good topic because it's something that we're seeing the historical inertia like move right now. Like literally this is happening. People are like, cash bail. White people are like, I don't know about this cash bail. They don't care about the racism as much as they do the Fourth Amendment, the deprivation of property, and the due process. And your rights when you're locked up in the six. They care more about that than, this is incredibly harmful towards black people, which it has been. I wonder, and I think it warrants further research, and I'm done after this, whether why Maryland is so bad with this has any historical basis in it being a destination for runaway slaves, free blacks within the neighboring slave states. Like if you get caught and you're black in Maryland, like is it especially high bail to keep your ass in prison while they find out if you were a slave or not, if you were a runaway slave or something like that? Or even more sinisterly, to be like, hey, we have no evidence that you were a free person, so we're going to arrange for you to go back into slavery. I wonder if there's any historical basis there.
He's a slave.
That's the origin of it. It's definitely the origin of it, and like everything in this country, like if it starts out in the roots, unless you just yank it out and start all over again, it's gonna keep going.
And I was just saying, Walter, real quick, like this is incredible information share because it's funny. I was just trying to pull it up now so I could sort of scroll through the article because in the local paper here in Nashville, there was an article that just came out. The title is "Judges Are Brushing Aside Bail Laws and It Costs You." And so basically what the article says is like there are actually laws in the books in Tennessee right now that, if it doesn't get to the level of being a black person, it certainly puts restrictions in place that judges should be doing when trying to set bail. But what's happening is it's not enforceable. So the judges just do whatever they want, and guess who's on the hook? The taxpayer. Now, I don't know about Maryland, but when you talk about taxes in Tennessee, they just had a 33% tax hike. I mean, oh my God, you thought the whole world was going to come to an end. And so because, in this article, it's interesting how they connected it to the fact of how, as a taxpayer, we're kind of footing the bill for this now because the judges are just kind of doing whatever they want. And as you said, you don't even have to look at it on TV or go to the statistics. I mean, you can just look outside the jail and see, who's in there. It's all people of color. And that's who it's impacting. And, that doesn't even represent Nashville, because I can tell you, when I first moved here, I called my wife in Atlanta. I was like, I don't see any black people here. I'm like, where are all black people here? But, they disproportionately represent, what's happening in the jail system right now here. And because a lot of these people are just sitting in there with these, crazy bails that the judges are setting, the taxpayer now is footing the bill. And it was just crazy.
So on that same vein, part I didn't get into, people who are detained through their trial. So if you're in pretrial detainment, your sentence is likely to be 4 times longer than someone who is out on bail and came in a suit versus in a jumpsuit.
It makes sense.
Wow.
It makes sense not only the economics behind it, but the literal how well can you participate in your own defense when you're locked up as opposed to when you're.
So that goes into exactly what I was going to say. Pretrial detainees must make a hurried decision often to plead to a lesser charge. They don't have time to consider with their family or the other impacts on the rest of their life that they could be facing by having to go home and take this Class F felony, or you could have the chance to go to jail because you're not going to get a jury of your peers.
Right.
What you going to do? You going to go home now and deal with the felony, or you want to roll the dice with the jury of 12 white folks and you're only a black person and you're a black person? What you want to do? versus, like I said, having that chance to make the right decision for you and your family.
It's revenue. Yeah, it's revenue for the state. It's all revenue raising. Like whether you're paying tolls, that's a form of revenue, or real estate taxes, that's a form of revenue. Locking people up is a business.
Yeah.
And it's been a profitable one. And I tell my kids the two motivating factors for the whole founding of this experiment, before we were even in the United States, the two motivating factors were money and religion.
Yep.
Everything that's come from there, everything that's happened has been a result of dollars or religion. Not every lesson we have, I'm like, what is it? They're like, oh, that's the money. It's like, yeah, like it is the money. It's like, oh, that's religion. I'm like, yep, there it is. Like you can see it. So yeah, this is a money issue. And once, we used to have debtors' prisons. Like this, we've been locking people up for all sorts of things. This is that, it's something to think about. And again, even people on, further left than me, what I like to call the Bernie left and the online left, they would say it's an economic liberty, economic justice issue more than a racial issue. And you can make that argument too, but I'm me. So I think it's a racial issue because it's affecting Black people overwhelmingly, more so than white people. Yeah,
it's frightening. Yeah.
It's interesting that it always comes back, in my opinion, to the representation that we don't have in courts, in law, even in law enforcement. We don't have the right representation across the board. We don't have the Black man and Black woman that we should that's looking out for a child.
Bingo.
Life ahead of them. All they see is the stereotype versus a human being. And that's unfortunately, that's what leads us to the continual cycle of where we are,
Yeah.
Very, very, very well said. Do you have anything to add, everybody?
No? Oh,
well,
yeah.
That was excellent.
433%. There you go. 433% increased cash bail from 1970 to 2016.
Yeah.
Almost exclusively in poverty-stricken areas. Almost exclusively.
Yeah.
That's purposeful. That's purposeful.
Yeah.
All right. Next we've got what plans to be an explosive conversation about plies, dating, and aesthetics.